I was having a chat with a guy, Chris, in the Instagram DMs, and we were talking about some stuff kind of regarding rigs and pedals and some of the big box pedals, and it came up because of the Fractal VP4, which I think has sparked quite a bit of debate around kind of expense, cost, digital versus the real thing, and all that sort of stuff. But I thought it was an interesting kind of jumping off point to talk about kind of the gear we think we need versus the gear that we actually need. This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. And this is, again, intensely personal, and it's going to be different for every single person, and it's going to vary based on a bunch of combinations like, do you have a lot of money? Do you have a mortgage? Do you go out and play live music? Is this like your escape, a hobby for you? And, you know, these sorts of questions. So it's not like a preachy thing. It's just, I guess, kind of just think about these things for myself and open up a conversation a little bit, because I think it can be interesting. Oftentimes you go on Reddit, you know, people talk about thinking they need a pedal, and you'll quite often see someone like jump in and just like gently nudge them that, you know, it's a pedal. It's like, none of this is really essential. You know, we're not saving lives here, we're making a YouTube video. Chris had said, never had a Fractal, which is why this kind of interests me. To your point about replacing stuff, right now I have an HX Stomp, Eventide H90, and 3 Meris pedals. That's 3 different power requirements, 3 different editors, and 3 different MIDI requirements. And the Meris pedals alone are $1,200 for the Duo. I may honestly just sell everything but the HX Stomp, including the amp I never use. You know, then he's talking about like trying to actually implement these things. I think I started to try and build one of these big boards with tons of options, but have concluded that it's too much for me. And he was asking in the Fractal forums if people think that an FM3 could replace all of my needs, and most thought it could. And I kind of concluded, yeah, I think the FM3 could do it all. And then he kind of said the biggest issue I'm having with all these big box pedals is getting the most out of them with the editors and whatnot. If you have 2 to 3 big box large pedals, that's 2 to 3 editors and UIs to learn, 2 to 3 power requirements, and not mentioned here, but also 2 to 3 analog digital conversions, even if you've got the analog drive-through. So you're going to have to, powering a bunch of these big box things is quite tricky too. And then he asked, would I choose the FM3 over the Stomp? So I said, daily I use Helix Native. Couldn't one of these all-in-one solutions actually be pretty useful in a lot of contexts and save a lot of time? Like, as difficult as it might be to use a Fractal FM3, if you read like people say that that's a tricky UI, if you use the editor, that's way easier than powering up 3 other devices and learning the MIDI protocol and, you know, program a switcher and all that sort of stuff. And now, if that's what you want to do, then that's also totally cool. I did have my good buddy David because I saw back in the day that he had this board that he'd put together. He was gigging this in like 2017. And so he's got a big Sky on there. He's got a timeline. He's got a Wampler Ego. He's got a Wampler Dual Fusion. He's got a Wampler Tumless. He's got a JHS app pedal. He's got a Polytune from TC Electronics. He's got a Digitech Drop. And he's got a Boss ES8 switcher. Now, altogether, the cost for that comes to this. And also, you got to think that if you were programming that to do all the switching and stuff, you've got to learn how a Boss switcher works. You've got to plug it all in. You've got to power all of that stuff. Then you've got to figure out Strymon's MIDI protocol and switching and all that stuff. So there's quite a lot of work that's gone into that. And I did ask him, like, are you happier using the FM3? Because that's what he uses live now exclusively. And he says, yeah, actually, way happier with that for the function stuff. So I think that's kind of an interesting point. I've actually myself gone through this process of making a real pedal board, you know, and putting together this system that is always changing. You know, am I ever totally happy with it? I'm not sure that I am. Am I ever totally happy with a digital rig? Again, I'm not so sure that I am. Like, that seems to be the constant thing, where these things are in a state of change, and on a gig, I guess we're maybe looking at the gear and kind of blaming it in some ways. Speaking of gear and blaming it, someone I think we can all agree sounds really good on a bunch of stuff is Eric Johnson. I'm thinking of Eric Johnson because I was sent a recording of Eric Johnson playing with a Tone Master Pro on a gig and then switching to his other rig. And it actually sounded really remarkably similar on both, but it was from my buddy Jeff Ainsley. If you're looking for some lessons and some great insight from Eric Johnson, I would recommend his TrueFire course. You could use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of Eric Johnson's courses. There's a masterclass and an In the Jam where he's sort of like, he's got these studio jam tracks that he's put together and playing. You've got tabs that you follow along on the screen. If you're a fan of Eric Johnson like I am, you'll probably really dig this. And it's some really great up-close footage, 3 different angles. You can get really in detail and a great view of what he's doing with his hands. So JNC40 for 40% off of any course on TrueFire. Actually, you know, there's loads of other great stuff on there from Andy Wood, Andy Timmons, Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, just amazing players giving great insight to their stuff. Or if you're wanting to sign up for the entire year to dip in and out of all of their courses, you can use the code JNC100 to get $100 off of their all access membership. Now, what I've kind of come to the conclusion for myself is, you know, I do a bunch of demo stuff on the channel, and part of that is about having loads of boxes and stuff like kind of around the place. But what I've been happy with for about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years at this point, is just plugging the guitar straight into my audio interface and using Helix Native. And if that doesn't show me that actually my home rig specifically could just be that, and I'd be absolutely fine. Like, it's quite stark to me, like, how much I actually don't need that much for recording at home, right? And if I was recording an actual project, the DIs are there ready to go to Ollie or whoever is actually asking me to record something. It's there ready to go in the DAW. I can make tweaks to the thing after the fact. It just, to me, like these amps and stuff like that, I did actually use an amp for a take of a solo that I sent to Ollie, and that's cool as well. But it's also like, once that's printed, like, that's kind of stuck, and if I'm improvising, it would take ages to then relearn that, to re-record it in DI, and I probably wouldn't get it sounding exactly the same in terms of the actual take anyway. So that's kind of gone and lost, whereas if I've recorded it with Helix Native, it's kind of there all along. And maybe that is, I think, maybe the future of some of this stuff, where actually workflow and less things maybe is a way forward. And likewise with guitars, you know, how many guitars do I actually play regularly? It's like 3 guitars. I've got that Silver Sky on the stand, I've got a K-line, 2 K-lines on the stand, and even when I'm playing, mostly I'm going to gravitate towards just one of them at a time. And you get kind of play better when you're used to just playing one guitar at a time. Anyway, I've found I've got a couple of guitars that I take out live for gigging. And then my live rig is more kind of just about experimenting and trying to find things that work than actually something that I really need. And more recently, I've been going with the FM9 and playing that in either a hybrid setup. So I sometimes will go into a real amp just on stage, and then front of house gets the other stuff. I could equally do that with an HX Stomp on that board, or I just go with the FM9 or the HX Stomp and a Fender FR12. Like, all of this other stuff here is kind of a little bit surplus to requirements, and it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of gear that you thought you wanted. And I like still look at amps and still look at pedals and all that stuff, but I'm actually pretty good with what I've already got. I don't know how you guys kind of noodle some of this, but just makes me think, like, I've got a lot of money still tied up in gear that, do I really need? Could I use it to pay off a mortgage a little bit? You know, these kind of thoughts go through my head a bit, especially as a supposedly responsible dad or whatever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yeah, in that intro I was using Helix Native, like always. Cheers for stopping by.